Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And thank you, NeurIPS, for inviting me. It's quite an honor. I've always feel like a student of machine learning, so it's great to be here. So the talk today I'm going to share with you is about visual intelligence. And the title is From Seeing to Doing, Ascending the Ladder of Visual Intelligence. I often start my talk with this imagery, and it's one of my favorite imagery. It's an imagery that no animal in the history of the entire planet has ever seen. It's what I call the first light. The first light happened 540 million years ago. That was the first moment simple animals in the ocean developed the first photosensitive cells in the head of the animal body and had the first glimpse of what the outside world was like. Since then, more than 500 million years ago, the evolution of visual intelligence began. But more than that, the evolution of seeing, of developing eyes, developing visual intelligence is deeply, deeply intertwined with the evolution of intelligence as a whole. We wouldn't be where we are. We wouldn't be the most intricate animals of the universe we know if it's not thanks to the ability to see and to perceive. In fact, human development began with seeing and sensing the world long before we're able to utter the first word. Babies are known to have the ability to use hand-eye coordination to get a sense of what this world is hours after they're born. And throughout our entire human development, the entire course of our life, we use seeing and perception to do things, to learn things, to interact with the world. Not only every individual human relies on visual intelligence to understand and make sense of the world, our civilization is built upon visual intelligence. There are many milestones we can document in human civilization. I'm just singling out some of the most memorable ones from the construction of ancient empires to the first glimpse of industrial revolution and industrial design, to construction of modern cities, to scientific discovery of DNA structure, to the masterpieces of art and cinematography, and to the world of machines that we're building here. All of this require humans' ability to use our visual intelligence as well as other parts of our brain. So really, the quest that I have been so passionate about in the past 3 decades, and with many of you in the audience, is how do we build visually intelligent machines? We really have come a long way, and I want to begin with a little bit of history and go into the present and the future. For me personally, the history started when I was a graduate student. I had a chat with a senior professor in our field talking about what is computer vision. And that was right after the turn of the century, in the 2000s. We know very little about computer vision. We know very little about how to build machines that have visual intelligence. So the professor told me, he showed me a page from his kid's children's book. And it's a page of 3 pandas drawn this way. I couldn't find the original page, so I asked DALL-E to draw it for me. And then he said, Fei-Fei, visual intelligence is about seeing these strokes of lines and understand what you're seeing. Understand the panda bears. Understand what they're doing. Understand the stories behind it. It was really the first glimpse of what to me is about for our visual intelligence. The first thing we have to do in understanding vision, in creating a machine that has visual intelligence, is understanding the world. It's putting labels on the semantic contents or perceptual properties that based on the visual pixels, labels such as objects like segmentation, video classification, human figures, and all this. And there are many aspects of this visual understanding that we can get into. Of course, one of the questions is, What is the first question we should work on for visual understanding? How should we unlock computers' ability of visual intelligence when it comes to understanding? And that was really where I began my journey in computer vision. And one of the most important North Star problem we latched on was object recognition. Why? Now it's so easy. We see all the incredible progress, but we forget just about 25 years ago, we didn't know what was the North Star problem. And we looked for inspiration from human cognitive science as well as neuroscience. Around the turn of the century, neuroscientists and neurophysiologists started to tell us that the ability for recognizing and categorizing objects is innate to humans. We're fast at it. We even have human neural correlates, areas in our brain that can recognize things like faces and places. So that was the beginning of our quest in machine vision, is to create algorithms that can do object recognition. Many of you are not even born in that time, but in the early phase of this quest, machine learning was beginning to become one of the most important tools for computer vision and visual intelligence. My own, if you come to NeurIPS 2004, 20 years early, the papers will be kernel methods. It will be BaseNet, conditional random fields, boosting, and a bag of words, latent richly processed. So many of those work were happening during NeurIPS. But it was still just experimentation. To be honest, nothing really worked. And not only things didn't work, we were working on problems that are so toyish compared to what the real visual intelligence is about. It was laughable. For me, one of the heroes in my intellectual journey is the late Professor Irv Biederman. I call this the Biederman number. Irv Biederman is a psychologist who conjectured back in 1983 that humans by age 6 are capable of recognizing more than tens and thousands of object categories. That number was daunting. It was more than any of the categories that the contemporary data sets was working on. At that point, our world of machine learning and computer vision were working on data sets of dozens of object categories with thousands or tens of thousands of data. So my students and I recognized we need a new way of thinking about machine learning. It's not just the algorithms. It's really the problem of generalization. And the problem of generalization is actually a combination of the capacity of the model as well as the data the model uses. And it's not also the quantity of data, it's the diversity of data. And that was the ImageNet project we rolled out in 2009 with my students, Jia Deng and Olga Rusagovsky and many others. What ImageNet did at that time was really to reboot a classic family of algorithms called neural network. And everybody here knows 2012, AlexNet, proposed by Professor Jeff Hinton and his students, won the ImageNet challenge of object recognition or object classification. And many people consider that was the beginning of the deep learning revolution. But what I personally learned, and I hope the field also learned starting that point, is data is as critical as algorithms. To this day, no matter how much progress we have been making in deep learning, in AI, in Gen AI, so much of that relies on data. So from a computer vision field point of view, data, especially the ImageNet challenge, really opened the floodgate of important work. This is just a sampling, a subset of the winners or significant work of the ImageNet challenge in the history of the challenge when it was held, starting from AlexNet and going to many other significant work. Here, even though I'm going through the history of computer vision, we do have to take a moment and pause that sometimes science is made by the convergence of many forces. Just around the time that ImageNet was proposed, neural network or deep learning was reborn. So did GPU was being made by NVIDIA. So these three elements, neural network, GPUs, and big data, were now known as the three elements that engendered the modern AI revolution. And many people call the year 2012 the year that convolutional neural network winning the ImageNet challenge, the birth year of modern AI. But that was just a side story. Now, let's continue with this quest of visual understanding. Here we're in the machine learning community. One of the most important things we have been learning about learning is representation. It turned out to unlock important problems in visual understanding, whether it's ImageNet challenge of object recognition or the COCO dataset of object detection, or many other important problems like segmentation. We need to learn representation really well. Here I want to give credit to one line of work by Kai-Ming He and his colleagues, starting from ResNet, which won the ImageNet challenge in 2015, I think, and also inspired by NLP work from Transformers and BERT. This work, Kai-Ming took ResNet and BERT into the masked autoencoder work of representation learning, which takes masked patches of images and try to learn it in a self-supervised way what the fundamental representation of images is. And the idea here is if we do this kind of self-supervised learning, we have a better way to generalize visual understanding tasks like object recognition or detection. And my students, Agram Gupta, recently have taken this idea a step further. Instead of looking at MAE in static images, he looked at MAE in videos where we use an asymmetric way to encode temporally ordered pairwise frames. So we will take all the patches of the first frame and then a mask version of the patches of a later frame and learn through the visual transformer self-supervised learning framework the representation of spatial temporal videos. And the result of this work is that Siamese MAE representation has a better way of generalizing a number of visual understanding tasks, ranging from reconstruction to semantic segmentation to key point detection. And here's a visualization of the attention map. I do want to say that while our lab is working on visual understanding, so many other exciting work has been happening in the area of visual understanding, such as fine-grained object recognition, pose estimation, instant segmentation, activity recognition, and all that. And I'm not here to give an exhaustive account of all this work. But this is not enough. It's actually deeply unsatisfying. So much of visual understanding and visual reasoning goes beyond what we see in the pixels. For example, relationship among objects are critical in our understanding of the visual world. So is the understanding of object permanence. You heard yesterday that babies have the ability to retain the knowledge of object even when they go off the screen. So that means there are things beyond pixels. So this is what I call this next step in visual intelligence, reasoning, the ability to infer or reason with information beyond visible pixels. Information such as object relationship. These two pictures have the same object, but it has very different relationship. And this is by my former student, Ranjay Krishna, who's sitting in the audience. And we use scene graph representation to tackle this problem. Of course, this way of representing the the relationship among entities on the image can not only help us to infer relationships that are common, such as person sitting on a chair, it also helps us to do zero-shot learning, such as person sitting on fire hydrant. And once again, data plays a big role. Randy and our collaborators put together this major data set called Visual Genome that has millions of hundreds of thousands of images, millions of objects annotated, millions of relationships, millions of descriptions, as well as millions of questions and answers. One of the work that follow Visual Genome is a visual Q&A work, such as the 7W-QA dataset that is part of the Visual Genome, where we put together a dataset of 7 Ws: what, where, when, why, who, how, as well as which. And my former student, Yuke Zhu, has taken this and did one of the earliest work in visual QA back in 2016. And later on, my former student, Alan Luo, just last year, actually 2 years ago at NeurIPS, took this to dynamic scenes and started looking at object relationships as well as descriptions in multi-object, multi-actor activity understanding and reasoning work. And of course, one of the ultimate sign of reasoning is you can tell a story from the scene. And this is a line of work that started by my former student, Andre Kapathi, and got passed on to Justin Johnson as well as John Krause, that back in 2015 were one of the first people who started using the early sequential, not even sequential model, early LSTM models and CNN models to do image captioning, and then dense captioning, and then paragraph captioning. It was really the first time that after almost 20 years of working in this field, I start to see the budding sign of human ability being replicated in computers in telling stories of images. But I don't know how many of you have seen Andre's tweet a couple of years ago. So as soon as we did the image captioning work, I think I actually made a half joke to Andre. I said, turn this around. Take a sentence and generate pixels. Andre very wisely, knowing he needs to graduate, said no. But the incredible thing is that idea was realized a few years later. So going beyond just storytelling, going beyond reasoning, the next step in visual intelligence is generation. Generation is not only about understanding information beyond pixels, it's about creating new pixels or altering existing pixels. So this is a step even further. Well, before image generation, my student, former student Justin Johnson again, was one of the first people who showed us visual style transfer. He did one of the first work in real-time visual style transfer, and he and Agrim took this a bit further into video visual transfer. So I really love this work. But then what really happened is a number of groundbreaking work from the machine learning community. One of them won this year's Test of Time Award, Generative Adversarial Network, as well as Variational Autoencoder. These two works started to show us the possibility of generating pixels. So again, Justin and Agrim are among the first team of people in the field of computer vision who took language input into the algorithm and generated pixels. Now, at that time, we're not very good with natural language yet. So we actually had to translate a sentence into scene graph structure and use a GAN algorithm to translate that scene graph into a scene layout, and then use that scene layout to and convolutional neural network to translate into pixels. So this is contemporary work with, at that point, the pioneering work with StackGAN. And you can see that the pixels generated were so blurry because the resolution was so low. But nevertheless, when I pulled out these slides for this talk, I was appreciating the history of computer vision and machine learning. It's only 6 years ago that we were able to generate some of the very first pixels for natural scenes in the field of computer vision, and they look like this. But very soon, diffusion model happened. Transformer-based diffusion model happened, and so many people, I could not possibly finish all the citations, contributed to this. I just want to promote one work from my own lab by Agrim Gupta. Recently has, at ECCV, published the video generation model called Walt, which takes in both image as well as videos and encodes this information and goes through a diffusion network. The details are not that important, to be honest, but even months before the first Sora release, the January Sora release, we were able to release this video generation work using far fewer GPUs. So that was an incredible feat, going from Andre's thesis to Agrim's thesis, from understanding to reasoning to generation. So putting all this together, as you can see, that we're starting to see these critical areas of tasks or North Star capabilities of visual intelligence, understanding, reasoning, and generation. And all of them only happens when data drives algorithms. So if I have to, I'm putting them on a ladder. I know nothing is completely linear, but still, ascending this ladder shows the progression of machine intelligence in visual domain, from understanding to reasoning to generation, supported by both data and algorithm. But is this the full story? Not at all. This is something that's really interesting. There's something fundamentally different from perception to language. Language is fundamentally generative. There's not a physical entity called language in the natural world. It is the way our mind works. But the world is physically there. In fact, this ecological approach to the world that is physically there is so important. The great psychologist J.J. Gibson used to say, and someone paraphrased him, ask not what's inside your head, but what your head is inside of. One of my favorite book in modern philosophy is Supersizing the Mind by philosopher Andy Clark. And he has a quote that I'm gonna quote here. If our minds themselves can include aspects of our social and physical environments, then the kind of social and physical environments we create can reconfigure our minds and our capacity for thought and reason. Whether it's J.J. Gibson or Andy Clark, what these people, psychologists and philosophers, are telling us is that there's something deeper in intelligence than just seeing it standing alone. Our intelligence, our visual intelligence, depend on the world we represent it, depend on the world we interact with. So, in fact, I do want to call out a sister field that is outside of computer vision and machine learning for a while historically, but now is starting to come into interaction with us, is the field of graphics. A lot of people in graphics for the past decades have been working on this idea of interacting with the world. But so far, everything I have shown is the interaction of a flat world. It's interaction of 2D. These images, these videos are flat. We can take this a little bit further and say, well, the same thing applies to language. Even if you look at the most omnipotent LLMs these days, the world is just documents. Or you can put more signal, multimodal signal into it. It's still flat world plus documents. So fundamentally, everything I've talked about so far is a flat Earth. And you might be wondering, why is she talking about this? We are so capable. We're seeing so many things that we're doing in flat Earth. And it seems like it's so capable we don't have to worry about it. That's actually not true. There's a lot of things that cannot be resolved. I can give you a long list of problems to call out if we only work in flat Earth. Such as weird artifacts and difficult reasoning, and image generation gets weird. It's hard to deal with occlusion. There's limited ways to interact. But I thought about it. I'm like, I'm just going to show you this one example. So some of us took a few photos of somebody's wine cellar and did a reconstruction of this space. And that reconstruction gives us a 3D model, mathematical model of what this world is. And then we inserted a virtual ball into this world. And it's so intuitive that the ball actually can follow physics and go somewhere in this 3D world. But if you give this same virtual ball into a 2D video or 2D image, the ball is not going anywhere. And that's the striking difference between 3D world and 2D world. As much as there's so much to work on in the 2D world, fundamentally, I want to inspire you today to think that there's far more things to work on in the 3D world. So let me bring back this panda bear, because I began my entire career is inspired by this children's book page. But I didn't tell you who told me this. And this is one of my favorite vision scientists, Professor Ted Adelson at MIT. He was the one who inspired me to think about visual intelligence. While this is an important story for me, Ted is not known for this story. One of Ted's most known work in vision science is this famous illusion, the checkerboard illusion. How many of you have seen this illusion? Okay, I'm impressed. Some hands are up. So if you haven't seen this illusion, you look at square A and B, you would think that they're completely different grayscale, right? There's no way they have the same grayscale. But if I block off most of the scene, suddenly you realize these two squares have exactly the same grayscale. This is the famous Ted Adelson illusion. So what does this illusion tell us? There are many ways to interpret this. For me, it tells the story of evolution. The story of evolution in 3D. That humans are so primed to understand the Earth is not flat, that cylinders have volumes, and light source are somewhere in space, and shadows are casted. All this gives us, we are so good at understanding this 3D world to the point that we can have this kind of illusion. So Plato, of course, knew about this as well. More than 2,000 years ago, Plato tells us what vision is about. He uses allegory of the cave as an example. He says, vision, the human vision, is similar to the following thing. Imagine you have a bunch of prisoners. You tie them on a chair, and they have to face a flat wall. And then there is a play that's happening in the back of their head. And the play was projected by the light onto the flat wall. And all these prisoners can do is to stare at this 2D projection of the play in the back of their head and infer what the play is about. And that is the problem of vision. We have a 3D world we live in, but our projection is 2D, and we have to figure out what's going on. So this is the one thesis I want to focus on today, is that natural world is 3D. And not only our physical world is 3D, our digital world is becoming more and more 3D. Whether we're talking about content creation, we're talking about gaming, we're talking about AR, VR, we're talking about robotics. All this is becoming our 3D, becoming more 3D. So the new ladder to climb, for me, going back to ground zero, is the 3D ladder, which I call spatial intelligence. So let's just go through a few work in this 3D visual intelligence ladder. Let's start with understanding and reasoning. I told you about the visual genome project, which is all about reasoning in 2D. But one thing we should acknowledge is that there are pioneers in the world of AI who have been reasoning in 3D, or at least told us we need to reason in 3D back in the 70s, such as Terry Winograd. His Charlotte work was a pioneering work to look at geometric shapes in 3D and ask computer programs to reason about it. Of course, there was no deep learning, there was no neural network, or at least not in this work, and so it didn't really work. My former student Justin, as part of his thesis, did one of the first 3D reasoning dataset in computer vision called Clever, and he used the Clever and some early deep learning algorithms to reason about 3D relationships with objects. Again, the details are not very important at this point. I just want to give you a taste of where this come from. At this NeurIPS, my current student Kashik is presenting the Hour Video Benchmark, which is specifically designed to benchmark MLLM's ability to understand and reason in 3D long-form videos. We took Eagle 4D dataset and hundreds of hours of videos and designed a high-quality multiple-choice questionnaire across 77 everyday scenarios and 18 different tasks, such as perception and tracking, tasks like identify the unique individuals that camera wearer interacted with, or navigation and 3D reasoning tasks such as how can the camera wearer get to the backyard from the kitchen. And the punchline here, you should check out his work, but the punchline here is the MLLMs today, the Gemini and a bunch of other work, GPT-4, do not do very well compared to humans. There is a huge gap between human expert that performs above 80% compared to the current MLLMs. So there's a lot to do in 3D reasoning in both spatial temporal places. Now let's talk about generation. One of the most exciting computer vision revolution I'm seeing in the past few years is the combination of reconstruction and generation. And so many of you in the audience have contributed to this incredible line of work. Classically in computer vision, 3D reconstruction is to take images, one or multiple, and reconstruct the 3D structure. And you've seen classic work like building Rome in one day. But recently, because of the NERF work by Berkeley people, including Ben Mildenhall, we are starting to see dense reconstruction. And combining dense reconstruction with diffusion models, some of the seminal early work that has happened in last year is by Google researchers in Dream Fusion, as well as 0, 1, 2, 3. These work takes reconstruction and combine it with generation and have become much more powerful tools in creating 3D objects and 3D scenes. My student, together with Jiajun Wu, Kyle Sargent, and our collaborators at Google have taken the work 0, 1, 2, 3 a step further and created this zero MVS work. It's a zero-shot 360-degree view synthesis work from a single image that was just published at CVPR this year. And the idea, I'm going to skip the idea. The idea is basically train a camera conditioned diffusion model as a supervision to a 3D representation and learned a lot from the Dream Fusion work. And the result is, given a single image of object or scene, we're able to reconstruct the entire 360 scene or entire 360 object. My student Tiange Xiang has taken a similar approach but applied it to dynamic human body. And here he used nerve-based method to reconstruct dynamic human movements, even with occlusion. I'm going to skip the details here. This is a work published at last year's ICCV, and we compare to a seminal work called Human Nerve, and we do better both in quantitative evaluation as well as qualitative evaluation, such as this video where the human is occluded and our algorithm is able to construct the full human body. So I've quickly showed you a few work in our lab ascending this visual intelligence ladder in 3D. But I want to actually take a pause and emphasize there's something even more exciting when we consider the world in 3D, and that's interaction. Because fundamentally, why did evolution create perception? My conjecture is evolution created perception not for us or for animals to sit there and count the number of cats they see. It's for animals and agents to move and do things. Remember, entire human development, throughout our entire life, we use perception to do things, to learn about the world, and to interact with the world. So spatial intelligence in 3D really catalyzes this virtuous cycle of seeing, learning, and doing. Of course, when we think about doing, we think about robots. And when we think about robots, we think about robots doing our chores. Especially if you're a graduate student, you want robots to cook your dinner, your breakfast, do your laundry, and maybe even write your papers. But the robots today are not there. The robots today are still pretty brittle. They are still in any organic environments. They tend not to generalize very well, this poor robot. And part of the problem is that a lot of robotic research today are still focusing on simple environments and tasks. And the experiments are handpicked by individual labs, are small scale, and lack the standard and benchmark metrics. Whereas the real world is ecologically complex, dynamic, large in variability, interactive, and multitasking. And we should learn something from vision and NLP. The one thing we have learned in the decade of deep learning is the criticality of data and the diverse amount of data. So I want to just use this time to focus on, let me check my time, to focus on a number of data-driven work in the robotic learning line of work from my lab. And I'll start with the project called Behavior. Behavior is a new North Star for robotic learning and embodied AI. It's a benchmark for everyday household activities in virtual, interactive, and ecological environments. It's a little bit of a mouthful. Many students contributed to Behavior. Right now, Behavior is consisted of 1,000 everyday tasks that people do. The simulation environment uses more than 10,000 object assets and 50 real-world scenes and a powerful simulator. The scenes include restaurants, offices, apartments, and schools and grocery stores. And the 10,000 object assets includes 30 plus properties for each object, including articulation, deformability, and so on. And then when you multiply together the 50 scenes, the 10,000 objects, the 30 properties, we really have the ability to instantiate infinite number of environments, synthetic environments that you can train robots on. And we collaborate with NVIDIA Omniverse team to create a simulator called OmniGibson that aims at realism in physics, in perceptual reality. And of course, we also want to do sim to real. So at least this is an early work where we have a real indoor scene in the basement of our department at Stanford, and our robot, mobile manipulation robot, is trying to perform some of the everyday tasks that behavior environment has trained us on. So all in all, behavior is a highly complex environment that simulates real life at real scenes and real objects that allows many kinds of robots to learn these long horizon tasks. And I really hope that those of you working in robotic learning check out this work. But behavior only focuses on the physical nature, actually only focuses on most of the visual scenes. But real world is multimodal. And this is a line of work that my former postdoc with Jiajun Wu, Rohan Gao has done, which we call object folder. He created a data set of multi-sensory objects. He selected 1,000 objects and collected visual data through a very controlled light box and 3D scanner cameras, as well as acoustic data through an acoustic enclosure, and used the impact hammer and microphone to record the sound of impact of these objects on different touch points, as well as tactile data by using a robotic arm and gel site sensor, also pioneered by Professor Ted Edelson and his collaborators, and RealSense camera. So the result is that we have a data set of multi-sensory objects and their neural representation that all of you can use to learn about multimodal nature of objects. So not only simulation is important, not only multimodality is important. What about real world? We have to go translate robotic learning from simulation into real world. So I'm really excited by this digital cousin work that were just presented at Coral a few weeks ago by my student Tianyuan Dai and Josiah Wang. The idea is that sim to real is really hard. And most people do this through digital twin. Somehow we have to lift the real world into the exact digital copy. But what if we can't do that? So we thought about this word digital cousin. So what is digital cousin? Digital cousin is not digital copies of the real world, but it strives to preserve similar geometric and semantic affordances. So compared to digital twins, digital cousin is less costly, it's more scalable, it's less manual, and it's better. It has better robustness in driving downstream policy learning of robotic learning. So what you can do is to just simply take a picture of the scene, and then use this scene to query a whole bunch of digital cousins through simulation environments such as behavior, and then use that to learn downstream policies. And the comparison to digital twin learning is digital cousin enables you to generalize better because it's not precise in terms of the objects that you're learning. And here's a real world experiment showing that we're able to do zero-shot transfer. Of course, these are all early work. You can see the environment is still very simple. Now, so far we have talked about data about environments, data about objects, but what about data that could teach robots to move their fingers? This is the fourth work I want to talk about. It's DexCap. DexCap is led by my student Chen Wang and collaborator Karen Liu and many others, where instead of using motion capture rooms, which is very clumsy, we actually asked the subject to just wear motion gloves. And then motion gloves would give much better data on the movement of fingers. This is Chen going around the real world, performing real world tasks and collecting high resolution finger movement data. And then he uses this data to transfer the knowledge and train robotic arms to participate very complex tasks, such as this bimanual tasks in tea serving. This is a very intricate intricate setup where you have to, use these scoops, spatulas, to get real tea out, and this is another example. So those are a lot of different ways we have thought about collecting data or creating simulation environment to drive robotic learning. But the truth is, it's hardly going to be enough. Unlike images and natural language, robotic data is really hard. So can we leverage on what we know through the large language models and large visual language models and do some zero-shot learning, or at least leverage on the language work, or multimodal language work that we have already done? So this is a line of work that we call Voxposer and Recap, led by my student Wenlong. Here is Wenlong Huang. Here is the general idea. If you tell a robot to open the top drawer and watch out for the vase, this is actually a really hard task for robots. For those of you who work in robotic learning, if you're in a sparse reward situation, it's very hard to learn that policy. But for humans, we have so much knowledge. We know what top is. We know what drawer is. We know what the vase looks like. We know what it means to watch out for the vase. So can we translate these human knowledge through LLMs and VLMs to the robot's policy learning? And this is what Wenlong tries to do. He uses large language models to help the robot to create a motion map that not only identifies where the drawer is, but how to avoid the vase. And this is the real world result. And he uses that, he tried that over 20 manipulation tasks, and there's no training because you're already using existing knowledge that's transferred through LLMs and VLMs. Not only, so far, what we have seen is spatial composition and teaching robot, using that to teach robot to do the task. What about temporal? Is there something we can do? So this is the follow-up work called Recap, where we not only identify, use LLMs and MLMs to identify the objects, we also identify the key points as well as sequentialize the task so that we can train a constraint optimization problem to teach the robot how to plan for the optimal policy. And I'm not going to get into the details, but here is a bimanual robot that identifies the scene of serving breakfast and identify the key point and learn to optimize the spatial temporal planning of these key points and then eventually performing the task. And in this case, we're showing almost 20 different or 16 different tasks that are multi-stage, that are can be reactive, is bimanual, as well as in the wild. So far, I have shared with you a number of work that we're doing using 3D spatial intelligence to really not only unlock some of the problem in visual intelligence, but also the problem in robotic learning and embodied AI. Everything I've shared with you so far is talking to you as a member of the community of NeurIPS. We all love AI. We all love machine learning. We don't doubt any of this work. But I want to actually zoom out a little bit, especially for the students out there, because AI is no longer just an academic field. I know this is an academic conference, but I go around the world. I hear from people who never ever attends NeurIPS, who never wrote a line of code, who look at AI in the news, in the podcast, in the social media, and they ask me the question of, so what? So what you're doing all of this? So what you did ImageNet? So what behavior is trying to unlock robotic learning? So what we can generate 3D scenes? And in this so what, the most important question is, what about us? Us not being anyone in the NeurIPS community, us being the people. And if you look at the news about AI, we hear a lot about the threat to human society, especially human labor threat, especially about robots taking away jobs and livelihood. And the news cannot be more alarming, right? Robots stealing jobs. How many jobs can robots replace? So the key word here for AI became replace. AI will replace humans. But this is where I want to share with you that as an AI scientist, I believe there is a much better verb than replace. In fact, let's replace the verb replace by the verb augment. AI is here because we want to use it as a tool to augment human capabilities. And I want to quickly show you 3 examples of AI augmenting healthcare workers, AI augmenting patients, and AI augmenting creators. And I'm going to be really fast because I know I'm out of time. In healthcare, we have a labor shortage problem. We have so many dark corners of healthcare, whether it's surgery rooms or patient rooms or senior homes or pharmaceutical pharmacies, where we don't have enough people and enough pairs of eyes and hands to help our patients. So in this series of work I did with my colleagues at Stanford, we put many computer vision sensors in hospitals as well as daily living space. And I'm going to skip the number of sensors. And the idea is that we can use AI, we can use visual intelligence to illuminate the dark space of healthcare, such as ensuring that our nurses and doctors perform hand hygiene practice well to ensure the safety of our patients, which kills, by the way, hospital-acquired infection kills 3 times more people in America every year than car accidents. So we use these depth sensors to help our doctors and nurses to learn about their behavior of hand hygiene. And this computer visual intelligence algorithm does way better than human observers because they're not fatigued and they can be done 24/7. We also put these sensors in ICUs. It turned out ICU patients need to be moved in a very thoughtful way. And my former student, Serena Young, has pioneered a number of work in the ICUs to help doctors and nurses account for how a patient is properly moved in the ICU environment. And this is the sickest environment in a hospital. And it's so important the patients can get the help. Last but not least, the healthcare condition, we help the elderlies. We can use visual intelligence to assess independent living situation, whether it's in early detection of infection, mobility change, sleep disorder, dietary disorder. These are all can be augmented by AI's help. And of course, there's going to be more. In this work, we use AI to empower the paralyzed patients. We've talked a lot about human task, about human data. What about the interface with humans? What about the interface with the sickest humans who cannot do work themselves because they're paralyzed? In this work led by Jiajun and my postdoc Rohan Zhang, we asked the patients or the subject to wear non-invasive EEG cap and record their brain signal and use their brain signal to direct robots to perform tasks. There's a lot of machine learning details here. Basically, it has to decode the brain signal and translate into robotic policies. But this is safe, non-invasive, and high resolution in temporal domain. So this is an example of a human subject directing the robot to cook a Japanese meal. And this entire video is recorded by using brain waves. Nobody ever touched this robot to perform these tasks. And we have done this in 20 challenging long horizon everyday activity tasks in our laboratory. There's a long way to go to help people, but this is a very exciting glimpse of the future. And last but not the least, AI can also augment creators. We're seeing a lot of generative arts, generative images, generative videos. It is very important for us to remember that human creativity is precious. It's part of our agency. And what we could do is to help our creators to have more powerful tools. And this is the work recently by my colleagues at World Lab. Whoops.
World Labs is changing the approach to creative problem solving with its new model. Imagine typing a prompt or using a reference image, and within seconds, generating a fully navigable 3D environment. That's kind of crazy, right? It's something that was not possible before, and I'm excited to share some creative ways this model can be applied. When working on a large project, you typically need to block out scenes and create geometry to lay out the props and environments. But this can be time-consuming and leave little room for bold experimentation. With World Lab's model, I can quickly generate multiple fully 3D environments and test various scene layouts as demonstrated in this example that I just created. Here's another exciting use case. Some animation studios are starting to use AI-generated images for their backgrounds. However, maintaining scene consistency across different camera angles is challenging. Studios often build or purchase 3D environments, take screenshots, and then process them using tools like Stable Diffusion. While effective, this process can take hours or even days. With World Labs tech, I can rapidly create a room, choose my angles, take some screenshots, which can then be stylized in an image generator like Comfy UI or Automatic 1111. This ensures consistent looking backgrounds while preserving the environment's feel and structure. We've also seen some huge advancements in video generation. However, a major limitation they face is the lack of longer and more complex camera controls. This new 3D generation method addresses that as well. By keyframing precise camera movements, I can export that render and run it through a video-to-video generator like Runway. And this is the output Runway produced. The process was very fast and easy, something previously impossible with this level of precision. This is an early preview of WorkLab's technology, but even at this stage, it's crazy what's possible. I'm super excited to see how this technology evolves and the creative opportunities it will unlock for everyone. World Labs has changed.
Okay, so that was actually an actual artist who is living in Europe, who used our technology to create things he wants to. You can go browse our website for more interactive applications with our 3D world. So let me just conclude. It was a pretty quick summary I just did about both the history so far, from my perspective, about computer vision, and especially how we ascend the ladder of visual intelligence from understanding, reasoning to generation by focusing on both the data as well as algorithms. We have seen a number of work, especially going from 2D to 3D, but there's a lot more to be done. I was just trying to think about problems I myself am interested from data, 3D, 4D data simulation, to what are the generation problems, especially controllability and consistency, and generation for robotics. Some of the reasoning problem, some of my collaborators are thinking about what is the theory of space as spatial temporal reasoning. We also know that evil understanding and recognition is not a solved problem in visual intelligence, and there's exciting work in MLLMs, and of course, representation learning, real-time diffusion, long-term horizon policy learning, inference, real-time inference optimization, and all this. So this is a long list. And last but most important, AI is here to augment humanity. We've seen 3 quick examples in healthcare, in robotics, as well as in Gen AI that could help different people. And there are infinite possibilities in enterprise AI, in AI for science, in AI for education, AI for energy, and beyond. And I really encourage the students in this generation to look at the intersection between AI and many of the impactful areas of the society. And last but not the least, thank you. in case you're wondering, I sent this to a Gen AI engine, and that's the picture it gave me.
We have, thank you very much. This was really an inspiring keynote. And we have a few questions on Slido. If you want to ask more, please put them there. As we are a little bit over time, I'll just run through a few. One that seems to be very popular is, do you see ever the need for data for learning to decrease?
That's a great question. I get this question a lot, are we always going to be at the scale, going up the scaling law of data? Well, I think our relationship with data will change. I think there's a lot that we can do with data. We still, in many areas, in 3D vision, in robotics, we still are not nearly scratching the surface of data, and we have a lot more. But in the meantime, our human development shows us that we're not ingesting nearly as much data as today's large models. So our relationship with data will change. How it will change is a really intriguing question.
Thank you. There is also one very interesting question that sort of follows up on your statement that visual intelligence is critical also for human intelligence. What do you think we can learn from blind people from birth? Is there part of the augmentation of this human intelligence that we can learn also for artificial intelligence?
Right. So one of the things that's very critical to recognize is that AI and human intelligence are not the same. So we do have visually impaired humans who are extremely capable. And that speaks a lot about the neuroplasticity of our brain. And there's a lot of studies that have shown that when someone is visually impaired or blind, whether by birth or by later acquired accidents or illnesses, there is neuroplasticity to rewire or repurpose different parts of the brain. And this is an area that is not well explored in AI algorithm.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one last question, which relates to breakthroughs in game playing. AI often rely on simulating thousands of games simultaneously. Is it possible to make sufficiently accurate robotic simulators, or will we need more data-efficient training methods to use real-world data?
Yeah, well, what a great question. Well, I hope some of my work in the second half of this talk is pointing to that. I think we do need robotic simulators. I also think it's very interesting now to see the different approaches. I personally think explicit representation of 3D is very, very important. It's going to be very, very important for a long while. So we'll see where this goes. Thank you.
Thank you so much once again for the wonderful talk, for the inspiration for our PhD students and all the other students. And for everybody else, please enjoy the poster sessions afterwards.